Hi, folks. Thanks for watching my monologue. As America starts to reopen, just remember that guns, etc., never closed. They still have over 10,200 square feet of ammo, firearms, and accessories, including safes, and they remain open for business. Stop by their huge store in Mesa or just click on gunsetcetera.com. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Thanks. Welcome back. Happy June 30th, 2020. I'll be taking a couple days off after today, mostly to celebrate the 4th of July, which, as many of you know, is just the most meaningful holiday to me. I haven't taken any time away from you since last year and promised to leave you in great hands with some of your favorite guest hosts, but as I was getting ready for the holiday, I was put in mind of a few things, mostly about what a wonderful country this is and how that itself has become such a controversial thing to say. America was never that great, said Andrew Cuomo, and he gave voice to a sentiment that runs deep here, sadly, today. And we have taken a few sucker punches, this country, but we took them. We didn't invent them or give birth to them. We absorbed them. What we do have, unlike any other country in the world, is the wherewithal to deal with them better than any other country in the world. The capacity for self-renewal. To me, that is part of our greatness. But some, too many, are invested in our failure. And some, too many, are invested in false narratives because of that first investment. Some do it for political purposes. Some do it out of ignorance. Some do it because they are internally and eternally unhappy. It is a shame for all of them, and shame on all of them. We wrote in America the Last Best Hope about the following story because we wanted to encourage Americans to stay in love with this country or fall in love with this country either again or perhaps for the first time. Not unreflectively, not blindly, but with eyes wide open. The great writer, adventurer, and map enthusiast Bernard DeVoto once had a good reason to write to his friend Catherine Drinker Bowen, the wonderful historian whose works, Miracle at Philadelphia and Yankee from Olympus, made history come to life in a wide audience. She was losing heart, getting discouraged in her history writing. Were her stories of America important? Was her celebration of her country and its achievements right? Where was the romance? DeVoto wrote this to her. If the mad, impossible voyage of Columbus or Cartier or LaSalle or Coronado or John Ledyard is not romantic, if the stars did not dance in the sky when the Constitutional Convention met, if Atlantis has any landscape stranger, or the other side of the moon any lights or colors or shapes more unearthly than the customary homespun wisdom of Lincoln or the morning coat of Jackson, well, then I don't know what romance is. Ours is a story mad with the impossible. It is by chaos out of a dream. It began as a dream and it has continued as a dream down to the last headline you read in a newspaper. The simplest truth you can ever write about our history will be charged and surcharged with romanticism. The dream of which DeVoto wrote is, of course, the American dream, and as he reminded us, and Bowen, despite our obstacles, setbacks, stupidities, even atrocities, this is an unparalleled and documented record of this dream being real. This country, this people. America was, is, and we pray will continue to be where, more than any place else, dreams actually can and do come true. Fervently do we hope and pray that dream never fades. It may seem an odd time to think and speak this way just now, but you turn on the television or your computer or smartphone and you see rioting, hatred, contempt, and all kinds of condemnation, not just for our president, but for our country and its many institutions. I was rewatching Larry Elder's new documentary, Uncle Tom. He'll be on with us later in the show. And several of the speakers said something I hadn't thought of, but was eminently true. Prior to 2008, prior to the election of Barack Obama, you really didn't see the kind of race talk and race war in America that's going on right now. You didn't see talk of America as ungreat or failed or racist. This is a relatively new thing. And after so much advancement, even in our lifetimes, what changed? Desperation for political power? Idiocy? A realistic awakening? I submit to you that there were generations before us far smarter than many of us today, and they didn't see things this way. The Marquis de Lafayette, after we won our revolution in 1777, said, "Humanity has won its battle. Liberty now has a country." In the 1920s, G.K. Chesterton traveled here and wrote this about what he saw. He wrote, "In America, it is inequality that is the illusion. The extreme disproportion between men that we seem to see in life is a thing of changing lights and lengthening shadows, a twilight full of fancies and distortions. We find a man famous and cannot live long enough to find him forgotten. We see a race dominant and cannot linger to see it decay. It is the experience of men that always returns to the equality of men. It is the average that ultimately justifies the average man. It is when men have seen and suffered much and come at the end of more elaborate experiments that they see men as men under an equal light of death and daily laughter, and none the less mysterious for being many. Nor is it in vain that these Western Democrats have sought the blazonry of their flag in that great multitude of immortal lights that endure behind the fires we see, and gathered them into the corner of Old Glory, whose ground is like the glittering night. For veritably, in the spirit as well as in the symbol, suns and moons and meteors pass and fill our skies with a fleeting and almost theatrical conflagration, and wherever the old shadow stoops upon the earth, in America, the stars always return." Where did this notion of freedom and equality come from? I thought I'd deliver a teaching not often seen or heard, the relationship between the Declaration of Independence to the Constitution, as it helps highlight what we have spoken of often here. A deficit in education the left either possesses or deliberately and by artifice creates. It comes from my old and great teacher Harry Jaffa. And as we head into the 4th of July weekend, I think it's time we take a listen to this. Let us begin by reminding that in the first number of the first Federalist paper, Alexander Hamilton defined the enterprise embodied in the Constitution as an attempt, quote, "to decide the important question whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force." It cannot be too greatly emphasized that the people's will, properly so called, is a rational will, whose inherent right to be obeyed is attenuated to the extent that it becomes merely arbitrary or despotic. "An elected despotism was not the government we fought for," wrote Jefferson in his notes on Virginia. "Certainly the courts should not usurp the powers of legislatures, but neither should majorities usurp the rights of minorities, nor should legislatures exercise powers that the people have not by the Constitution delegated to them. For the doctrine of the framers of the Constitution was a doctrine of limited government, and the idea of limited government must be understood not only in relationship to what the people collectively have reserved to themselves and have not delegated to the government. It must be understood as well in relationship to what the individuals informing a people have reserved to themselves. What individuals have thus reserved, even the people collectively have no right or power to delegate to government. Such reservations imply, therefore, that even the collective sovereignty of the people, such as that which ordained and established the Constitution, is limited. The sovereignty of people does not authorize the establishment of any government whatever with any powers whatsoever. The people have no rightful power to do whatever is not naturally impossible. The elements of rationality implicit in the choice of a free government obligate one not to impose despotism on others. These same elements of rationality inform the ordering of a free as distinct from a despotic government. Separation of powers, for example, was generally understood to be an indispensable feature of free government. The idea of the rule of law flowing from the proposition of natural human equality is embodied in the reciprocal requirement that those who live under the law should share in making the law they live under, and that those who make the law should live under the law that they make. In 1825, James Madison and Thomas Jefferson considered what books and documents the Board of Visitors ought to recommend as authoritative principles of instruction for the Faculty of Law at their new University of Virginia. The question uppermost in their minds was how best to educate lawyers who were most likely to be the legislators, executives, and judges of the future, those whose vocation would make them, in a peculiar sense, the future guardians of the Constitution and of a Republican freedom. Madison and Jefferson, they were aware of the delicacy of proposing to tell professors what to teach. They would not think of doing so, Jefferson said, in most of the branches of science in which the university offered instruction. And yet he wrote, and surely not without reason, quote, "There is one branch in which we are the best judges. It is that of government," close quote. So these two ex-presidents and founding fathers concluded and recommended to the Board of Visitors, of which both were members, and Jefferson was president, that of the best guides to the principles of the Constitutions of Virginia and the United States, the first was, quote, "the Declaration of Independence as the fundamental act of union of these states," close quote. Let it be noted that Jefferson and Madison here refer to the Declaration not only as the instrument by which the 13 colonies separated themselves from Great Britain, but as the instrument by which they combined with each other to become one union. 13 states indeed, but 13 states united. As the fundamental act of union, their words, the Declaration was and remains the fundamental legal instrument attesting to the existence of the United States. From it all, subsequent acts of the people of the United States, including the Constitution, are dated and authorized. It defines at once the legal and moral responsibility and personality of that, quote, "one people who are said to be a good people, who separated themselves from Great Britain and became free and independent." It thereby also defines the source and nature of that authority that is invoked when, quote, "we, the people of the United States, ordained and established the Constitution." For the same principle of authority, that of the people, that made the independence of the states lawful, made lawful all the acts and things done subsequently in their name. This tells us why the Constitution ought to be obeyed, why we have a duty to obey it, and why, in what sense, it may be truly said that the voice of the people is the voice of God. For these reasons, the Declaration remains the most fundamental dimension of the law of the Constitution. It is the Declaration that tells us why and in what sense the government of the people is a government of right and not merely of force. It is by virtue of the principles of the Declaration that the Constitution must be said to reject the thesis that justice is nothing but the interest of the stronger. To repeat, the Declaration of Independence, as seen by Jefferson and Madison, tells us why the political authority of the United States is also a moral authority, and why the physical force by which the United States may protect and defend itself is a moral force, and not merely the expression of collective self-interest. Finally, it tells us why slavery must be regarded as an anomaly, a necessary evil entailed upon the Constitution, but not flowing from or consistent with its genuine principles. One would have thought that this opinion was canonical, since both the author of the Declaration and the father of the Constitution, who were also the third and fourth presidents of the United States, had agreed upon the Declaration of Independence, both as the fundamental act of union and as a guide to the principles of the Constitution. While the Declaration continued to be appealed to in public debate for its pronouncement that the just powers of government are derived from the consent of the governed, the proposition that all men are created equal was scorned and rejected. It was scorned and rejected notwithstanding the fact that the equality of man is the ground or reason for the requirement of consent. For if there were an inequality among men, such as there is among other species, there would be no reason for consent to give legitimacy to government. No one asks his cattle or his dog, horse, or cow, or pig for its or their consent. Those who demand that the founders gave us a pro-slavery founding ignore wholly any distinction between the principles and the compromises of the Constitution, compromises made to get us to a ratification of the principles. To those who support the notion that the founders gave us a pro-slavery founding, they are in accord with the majority decision of the Dred Scott case. Let us recite how Abraham Lincoln in 1857 met the objection that blacks could not have been included in the Declaration because the Founding Fathers had not immediately abolished slavery. He said Chief Justice Taney, in his opinion in the Dred Scott case, admits that the language of the Declaration is broad enough to include the whole human family, but he argues that the authors of that instrument did not intend to include, his word, Negroes, by the fact that they did not at once actually place them on an equality with whites. Lincoln continues, now this grave argument comes to just nothing at all, by the other fact that they did not at once or ever afterwards actually place all white people on equality with one another. They did not mean to assert the obvious untruth that all were then actually enjoying that equality, nor yet that they were about to confer it immediately upon them. In fact, they had no power to confer such a boon. They meant simply to declare the right so that the enforcement of it might follow as fast as circumstances should permit. They meant to set up a standard maxim for free society which could be familiar to all and revered by all, constantly looked to, constantly labored for, and even though never perfectly attained, constantly approximated, and thereby constantly spreading and deepening its influence and augmenting that happiness and value of life to all people of all color, everywhere. Close quote. That's Lincoln. You've heard me say before, and it's worth saying again. Those who claim evil or racism in our birth and founding, they are in league with and of the opinion and philosophical view shared by Chief Justice Taney of the Dred Scott decision. Those who support separating us by race are in league with and of the opinion and philosophical view shared by the Plessy v. Ferguson case. Those who take up arms against our institutions and call us corrupt and worse, saying we were rotten from our core, are in league with and of the opinion and philosophical view of the Confederacy of the United States. Yet reporters and high culture seem to all share that view. Well, I don't. I stand with Lincoln. I stand with the Marquis de Lafayette. I stand with Frederick Douglass. And I stand with Martin Luther King. This is a great country, the greatest, and I look forward to celebrating its birthday yet again for my 51st time. I, for one, am proud to be an American because I am proud of America. This is indeed the place where humanity has won its battle and where liberty now, and let's hope forevermore, has a country. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.